to be able to remove this lower timing belt cover off, one of the main things besides the obvious mounting points you see on it, which would be just a 10 millimeter. It's also held in by, I think back here is something where I cut. Yeah, so sorry about this, guys. Right here, there was a 10 millimeter bolt, which was hard to get to because the water pump was pretty much covering it. Even with a open-end wrench, it was still a headache to get, which is why I proceeded to remove the water pump. And that pulley is obviously covers this whole part, so the lower crank pulley needed to go. And if you guys could imagine, if you've done this before, if not, you probably heard the horror stories of what it's like taking this thing off. And the story was true. 320,000 miles, and I guarantee you this thing's never been done. I mean, the belt didn't look that bad, so maybe it had to have been. So this is gonna be 17 millimeter. I was able to get it off. I hit it with some PB Blaster, let it sit for a night. Went at it again, still didn't work. I actually got a 17 millimeter impact socket. It helped a little bit, but it still didn't work. So what I did was a cool little trick that I heard about, actually I knew about, I completely forgot about it, was actually with an impact gun, hit it, tightening it, hit it in the direction to tighten it, just a couple hits, and then proceed to loosen it, and then just go back and forth to pretty much kind of work the threads to where it'll break loose. And that method worked for me. Thankfully, I didn't have to use heat or any more sort of penetration oil to be able to break it loose. And so if you guys are wondering, so how do you do that without making the pulley spin? So cool thing is, if you have a manual transmission car, I just put it in 5th gear. Once you put it in 5th gear, it'll lock it out. So this will turn this a little bit, and then it'll lock itself out, and then you'll be able to get the rest of it out. So here, I'm gonna show you more in detail in 1 second. Okay, so I just put it in 5th gear. Oh yeah, set it at top dead center, obviously, and then I already hit the bolt. I got the bolt out; it was already loose. So here it is. This is what it looks like when it comes out. It's gonna have one giant washer on it. I'm gonna proceed to this crank pulley. Alright. And when you pull, you hear that thing I just dropped? That is a very important part. Okay, found it. Here's the important part. This is the key. This thing fits right in that little slot right there. You guys can see that. And what that does when you put... sorry for the blinding light. I didn't mean to throw 800 lumens worth of light. Actually, you know what? Here, I'll just do this. Oh, that actually works. Okay, yeah, so you see... sorry, guys. You see that right here? So yeah, that key goes in between the pulley and this part right here. This pretty much makes sure that when the crank is spinning, it's not going to just slip around here. It kind of locks it in place. So that's an important part. And also behind that, you're going to have this little piece right here. So make sure to have that there. And yeah, then at that point, so the bottom part to remove this from here is okay to go. And then as I said, for the rest, you got to unbolt 10 millimeter. Then you're going to have the tensioner bolt coming out through here, and the water pump's going to be sitting right here, I think. Something like that. Well, anyway, you need to remove it, or if you guys can figure out how not to remove it, let me know, and then yeah, more power to you. All right, so this is going to be kind of hard pointing at it and stuff, so I'll just draw little circles and arrows in the video to help you guys identify. So normally it's a good idea to replace the timing belt tensioner all the time. So I'm not really going too crazy on this head gasket replacement. So it doesn't cost much, but I haven't really heard of any tensioners ever failing for vehicles. And as I said, like this engine honestly is going to be pulled later on. I just want to have a reliable, good to go A20 before I swap in another A20 in here, which is going to be the build motor. So, but in case when you remove it, if the whole housing falls and you see like a spring and a bunch of other crap falling down, just to let you guys know what it is. So you see in the bottom left here, I'm going to have an arrow pointing to it. You'll see a spring. There's a little thing on the block that it hooks onto. Then it hooks onto a hole on the bottom of the tensioner. And then on top of it, there's a little divot right here. And then the top hole of the tensioner just slips right on there. So if you guys want to know what it looks like. And then, yeah, basically you throw the belt on there. And then when you tighten the belt, it's going to move. And then you just loosen it up. And then once... I'll show you the process, so it'll make sense. I know it sounds weird how I'm explaining it now, but basically when you tighten the belt, This is going to move, and then once it's taut in place and everything's tightened down, then you just tighten the bolt and everything's locked in place, and that tension won't go anywhere. Okay, so the head's about cleaned up and about ready to get thrown back on. Finally got the gasket on. So this is a Felpro one. I just got it at AutoZone or any auto parts store that's near you guys. This is more specifically a Felpro. If you guys look at their website and want to know what type to put it up on, because if you got this, some of their models for other vehicles actually have it labeled down, whether it says top, front, left, right, towards the drive belt and all that stuff. However, on specifically ours, there is no engraving telling you which side faces up or what direction it needs to face. I'll even show you the back side if you guys need proof. Don't damage it anymore. Nothing. No markings. Now, according to Felpro itself, there's a video on it on YouTube and on the website as well. It says that if you get a gasket from them that does not have any indication of which side needs to face where, it does not matter. This is from them. It does not matter which side faces the block and or the head, and vice versa. It can be set down like this, which is what I'm planning on doing, since most of their other models are usually labeled front with a lace towards the back, as you can see here. Or you can even set it like this. According to them, this is fine if there is no markings indicating which side is up or down, front, rear, anything like that. And another thing too, when you guys lift the head, there's a chances it'll go with the head, or there's chances it'll stay in the block, or they might just fall out upon lifting. These dowels are very important. Do not lose these. They both, doesn't take much to take them out or put them in. So these are very important in alignment of the head when you put it back on, so keep that in mind. So the cylinder head's back on, everything looks good. Something about the Felpro gasket kind of tripped me out a bit, but nothing to worry about. There's a little piece right here that stuck out, so I thought I put it on wrong, but I guess it's just an aftermarket thing to where make it, if you ever pull the head back off for whatever reason, it's just more convenient to pull the head gasket off. So nothing too much to worry there. Other than that, the only part in this video that's not going to be included, which I highly recommend, as I said, the only reason why I didn't do it besides money and time and just convenience is it's more of a test for me. I want to see if this works. I said I did all the warpage checks and everything is within spec. So, but the best thing to do, guys, if you want like almost 100% insurance, if you follow all these steps right, to ensure a good seal, is to get the head resurfaced, get it milled at a machine shop. You know, they'll test everything and make sure when you put your head down and everything's retorqued to spec, that you have a proper seal and you're good to go. Nothing will ever beat that. So, but I feel pretty comfortable with the way I cleaned up the head as well as the block to get a good seal. Just make sure if you guys decide to do it like I did, just to make sure that all the gasket's off, that you have a really flat surface. Right before I slapped both of these on, or sorry, the head on the block, I just ran some acetone on both the block as well as the head, just to make sure there's like no residue whatsoever. And then I just got myself, if you have an air compressor or whatever, any compressed air, just blow out any sort of like dust or gasket material or anything that can get in between the gasket and the head or the block. All that good stuff. We want to minimize whatever could get in between all of those to ensure a proper seal. And yeah, other than that, guys, I'm about to put the head bolts in, and I'll talk about that now. Okay, so before putting in the head bolts, and yes, you can use the original OEM head bolts. I've known many members who've done it before without any issue. In fact, they've done it over torquing past spec, which is what I'm planning on doing, and I'll talk to the reason why on that. Just make sure that before you do it, clean it off. You want to put some oil on the threads just to make sure that these bolts never have a chance of pretty much seizing, because that would really suck trying to get these out, getting a broken head stud. So yeah, one on the left, pretty much what it looks like. Clean it up on the right, just an idea of what it should look like right here on the right. I haven't put oil on this yet, so we'll say when that comes in too, that'll be a good idea. Another thing I did too, I marked down where each head bolt came from, so that's also a smart thing to do. If you got, especially if you're gonna reuse them, you don't have to do it. It's just something I'm doing just because I'm weird like that. So yeah, so before I slap these on, I'll talk about torque specs here in a second, but just to let you guys know, if you are in the middle of this, that ARP, if you ever heard of ARP, they make performance head studs. sorry, the years elude me. The first generation NA model, not the naturally aspirated, NA Mazda Miata head studs, that part number, I'll put it in the description, will work and fit with the A20. So there's an idea if you guys want to upgrade head studs later on, if you guys are going to run boost for whatever reason and want to reduce any chances of head lift, there's a good option right there. ARP, first generation, I want to say 90 to 93, Mazda Miata, NA chassis, head studs, ARP, will work for the A20. I'm going to talk about these head bolts in a little bit more detail. So these are standard head bolts. They are not what is known as torque to yield head bolts. If you guys are unfamiliar with those are not reusable, or at least they're not advisable to be reused, because pretty much they are designed to be stretched, which increases the clamping force of between the head to the block. And once that's stretched, it's stretched permanently. So these are not the case for these bolts. However, if you do remove these bolts and you see any sign of damage or stretch, they're junk. Get a whole new set, in my opinion. If you have the extra money, replace them with the ARP first generation NA Mazda Miata head studs. I'll leave, as I said before, I'll leave the item number in the description for that. So yeah, other members have reused these. In fact, they've reused them under some turbo applications from what I remember seeing. They've even reused them and torqued them down past factory spec. So as I said, there's no problems going that route. As I said, you just inspect them, make sure there's no damage or signs of stretch, you're good to go. I personally am going to torque them down past what's recommended spec. You guys do not have to do that. I'm not implying that you guys should. In all my videos, in the bottom of the comments, I always put a disclaimer saying I'm not responsible, I'm not liable to any damage that you guys cause to your vehicles due to the information that I give off in this video. So let's just get that out of the way. I'm going to do it, and here's my reason why. So first off, according to the Accord Master Manual, it's a two-step process. First step, you're going to torque in sequence, and I'll tell you what the sequence is here in a second. The first step is you're going to torque them down to 22 foot-pounds. And then the second and final sequence is going to be to 49 foot-pounds. I myself am going to set my torque to 55. I've seen people go as high as 60. That's a little too much for me. It's basically just a stock setup that I'm running. If I'm running boosted and I had nothing but these head bolts that I'm working with, I more than likely would go up to 60. And pretty much as if I don't risk snapping these bolts doing that, which I don't think I would, then I would definitely risk lifting the head off, even though I probably wouldn't be running that much boost, but that's a hypothetical. So here's my reason why I'm gonna over torque them down from factory recommended 49 foot-pounds to 55. So there's different size sockets you guys deal with. This is pretty much your average 6 size deep socket. Now obviously, I mean, if you guys can fit a just your normal size socket, not non-deep socket onto here, then you should be fine. Honestly, if that was the case, I'd probably do it to 50 foot-pounds just because that's what I would feel comfortable doing. But so I'm digressing anyway. So you have your deep sockets. You have your 6-sided like this. You have your 12-sided like this, if the camera picks it up. Or you have your impact, which has a little bit thicker wall like this. Now the impact is going to provide the most accurate tension when applying the foot-pounds, because if you guys don't know, some of you guys may, when you guys use your torque wrench, the longer, if you guys are using extensions of any sort, you're going to get, in a microscopic scale, you're going to get twist on that socket, which is going to be power loss, or sorry, not power, well, think of it like that. Think it would be power loss into turning that wrench to get a more accurate, precise torque foot-pound to that bolt. If that makes any sense. So for example, if I set the torque wrench to the 49 foot-pounds, and for some odd weird reason I decided to use I used an extension, and I torqued it to 49, it'll probably be somewhere around the part, and I'm exaggerating here, maybe around like 46 to 48 instead. So you want to it's kind of a guesstimate here and there. Now, like, so you can get away with stuff like that on like valve covers or spark plugs, stuff like that. Doesn't really hurt to be like a pound or two under or over. Definitely you don't want to super exceed either or. But that's the reason why I'm going to go this route and do the 55. And just, even if I do add an extra pound or two. Here comes a really important part, so guys, pay attention. This is going to be the torque sequence. The first torque sequence I'm going to do, and what the manual says, 22 foot-pounds. I'm going to start with this. This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. First step, 22 foot-pounds, all of them. According to the master manual, the second and final step is to then torque these down in the same sequence to 49 foot-pounds. I myself am going to add an extra one in there. I'm going to do 22 foot-pounds first, and then I'm going to do 40, and then I'm going to do 49, and then I'm going to do 55. So sorry, I'm going to add 2 extra in there, just for reinsurance. None of those will hurt it going that route. So I got the timing belt on. So one of the challenging parts in doing this was pretty much you guys are going to have to preload the tensioner, and how you do that is before you put the belt on, you can use like a long screwdriver like I did, or use any sort of anything you can use for leverage without damaging the pulley itself or anything else. And I pretty much slipped it here and used the bracket, the engine bracket that's mounted to the engine. Oh, and by the way, you may have to remove your motor mount, your driver's side motor mount. I did, because I have an aftermarket Cheetah Auto motor mount, which is awesome. If you guys have the stock one and it doesn't interfere, because you basically have to slip the belt through here to get on the cam gear. It's pretty obvious once you guys get to that part. But anyway, so when you preload the tensioner, you pretty much got to use leverage and pry it this way, making it go to the right and stretch out the spring. Once you stretch it out, tighten it down with your other hand, or have somebody help you while you're preloading it, and then have somebody tighten it down to where it pretty much simulates as giving the belt some slack, giving you the chance to pretty much slip it all on without any problems, and then loosen it again for it to tighten it back up, which is not going to be the final tension on it. The final tension, once everything is back on, is you're going to have to, while this is loose, you're going to have to crank the engine by hand. And when you do that final crank it by hand, it's going to self-tighten even more. And then that's going to be the final tension, and then you lock down your tensioner bolt. And you're done with that. Okay, the timing belt's on. I'm going to start bolting everything back together. Water pump, alternator, distributor, just all little ends and odds that pretty much have to be unplugged or taken off to be able to do the head gasket job, as well as the timing belt. I also am going to flush out the radiator as well as the heater core to make sure nothing but just fresh water flows through those items. And then pretty much I'm going to run distilled water through the whole system, because I'm going to do a couple flushes, which I know it's going to need. As long as there's no more signs of a blown head gasket, pretty much no more white blue smoke coming out of the tailpipe, as well as oil and coolant mixing with each other, should be good to go. I also got to throw in some oil in there, brand new oil, because there's no oil in there, so just freshening some things up. And if there's, at the end of the day, if there's no more signs of a blown head gasket and it's running strong, then everything worked and everything's good to go. Okay, everything's pretty much back on. I just got to add some oil and water, flush her out, start her up, and see where we're at from there. So while we're here, I'm just going to talk about my preferences on oil filters and oil that I use for the A20. I use Wix oil filters. I usually always have for all the A20s or both A20s that I own. Been using them for a couple years now, mostly because it was a couple of the members from 3Gs would recommend them, so nothing wrong there. I've used K&N filters and Mobil 1. I've had zero problems with those. The only oil filters I would stay away from would be Fram. Another oil filter that I use for my daily driver, the Civic, the D16Y8, this is Hamp oil filter, specifically the small one. They make a bigger one than this. You guys can see like a size comparison. I'll do a separate video on why I chose to go with the smaller one, the D16Y8, on another video. And for the oil I've been using for the A20s, all of them, 1030, Mobil 1, fully synthetic, or at least 1030 full synthetic of some sort of oil. For the D16Y8, I usually use 540 Castro. So as I said, never had any problems running those. And I don't want to use this video as talking about oil weights for certain applications, but yeah, there we're at. So hopefully get this thing started up. She's running. And she's holding operating temp. And no more smoke, so not the win for me. Our buddy Smiley stopped by. I'll leave a link in the description. Check out what he does.
SmileySpeed.com.
SmileySpeed.com. If you want to see more cars like this, or better, definitely check that out. And that's a wrap, guys. Alright guys, that concludes the head gasket and timing belt job for the A20. I just want to end with a couple things. Just make sure when you guys hook up all your sensors back up, like map sensor, TPS, IAT, IACV, all that good stuff. Make sure your hoses are clamped down and just check for leaks and all little ends and outs. You guys should be good and the car should start. If you're having a rough time, give it some gas, because fuel probably been sitting for a little while depending on your situation. Also, if it's having a really hard time starting, you could be having a timing issue during the timing belt phase. You guys may be really far off timing, so you just kind of recheck that. If that becomes an issue. And another thing I'm going to add to you guys, one thing you can do which doesn't hurt to check is, so after the vehicle goes through a heat cycle, so pretty much operating temp and then cools back down, doesn't really hurt checking the head bolts to see if they're still within torque specs. Some people usually drive even like 100 miles up to even 1,000 miles before going back and checking just to make sure they didn't get loose or something weird happened where they stretched out or whatever. So it doesn't hurt just to check to see if they're still at the recommended torque specs. But yeah, other than that, guys, thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.